chapter 25, section 4. So the city of Jerusalem, Christians from Europe had been visiting Jerusalem for hundreds of years. But in 1071, the Seljuk Turks are going to conquer Jerusalem and they take it over. This means they now control the Christian shrines. It's going to be hard now for Christians to travel to Palestine and visit Jerusalem. I mean, this shocks the Christians in Western Europe, and it's going to lead to a series of holy wars that's going to be called the Crusades. So let's talk about this story. So the Turks had begun threatening the Byzantine Empire. This is the Eastern Roman Empire. It's called the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine emperor is going to ask the Pope over on the other side, going to ask the Pope for help, for military aid. Pope Urban II, out of Rome, agrees. He hoped that if he helps out the Byzantine, that maybe the Eastern Orthodox Church would reunite with the Catholic Church. So in 1095, Pope Urban is going to speak in the town of Clermont, France. He said the Lord should stop fighting each other and they should be fighting the Turks. Urban said, Europe is struggling to produce enough food, but Palestine has rich, fertile land, and knights could live comfortably there. And Urban promised the Crusaders, if they go and they fight in this holy crusade, they would be free of debts and taxes. And he promises them that God would forgive the sins of those that died in this battle. Serfs, prisoners are all encouraged to go. They're told they'd win their freedom. And Urban says they should wear red crosses on their tunics. Pope Urban II is going to spend 9 months going from town to town. And the people respond. The people hear his message and they respond. And the war cry is, it's the will of God. People thought it was their responsibility to win back the Holy Land. Some do it for other reasons as well. You got nobles that go that want to win more land. You got some people that go because they want to become famous. You got peasants sometimes that go because they want to escape the hard work that they had to do in Europe. So let's begin with the Peasants' Crusade. Urban II wanted nobles to plan and lead a crusade. The nobles were experienced in this, but the peasants were tired of waiting, and they actually formed their own armies to go to the Holy Land. But the peasants weren't trained in warfare, but they thought God would help them. So in 1096, 12,000 French peasants begin a journey heading to the Holy Land. You got 2 other groups that are going to leave from German areas. On their way to the Holy Land, they are going to attack farmers and loot cottages and burn wheat fields. They massacred or killed Jews. They said they weren't Christians, so they must be the enemy. Villages were scared. You had villages that the peasants were coming towards that would poison their wells, hoping to kill off some of these attackers. They would attack the Crusaders' camps before they could be attacked. A third of the peasants died by the time they even reached Constantinople. They had rags for clothing. They had no money. So what peasants were left kind of just wandered the city of Constantinople. They would attack people and steal from homes and markets. The Byzantine emperor was very disappointed. He thought the Pope was sending him trained soldiers, and he gets this ragtag group of thieving peasants. The Byzantine emperor actually hurried up and he gave the peasants supplies and ships. And he sent them on to Asia Minor to fight the Turks, get them out of Constantinople. The Turks, in turn, kill most all of these peasants. So this peasants' crusade was not a success. So let's go to the nobles' crusade. So in 1097, the nobles go on their own crusade. Each army was led by a great lord, and this is going to be an expensive crusade. These nobles, they brought their vassals and their wives, their kids, they brought cooks, they brought blacksmiths, they brought all sorts of people. Each lord provided his own supplies and weapons and horses. Actually, a lot of lords had to borrow to be able to fund all this, and a lot of them actually go into a lot of debt. But about 30,000 crusaders do arrive in Asia Minor, and they beat the Turks. And then they start heading south, heading towards Jerusalem. But they're not ready for the heat that they were going to face. This was desert they're going to go through down here. They're short on food. They're short on water. You're going to have many die from starvation and thirst. In 1099, about 12,000 reach Jerusalem, and they capture the city. They killed Turks. They killed Jews. They killed Christians, and they loot the city of Jerusalem. After winning, many of them returned home, but some of them stay, and they set up 4 kingdoms, called Outremer, or kingdoms beyond the sea. Arab peasants work the land. Arabs give advice to the nobles. Arabs are managing the nobles' estates here. There becomes a friendship between these crusaders that stayed and the Muslims. Many crusaders that stayed started to change lifestyles. They started, bathing. They started wearing cooler clothes and eating lighter. Life seemed easier in Palestine than it did in Europe. Many still died in battle, though, and couldn't stand the heat that was in Palestine. In 1174, Saladin rules Egypt. And Saladin is going to unite the Muslims in the Near East. And they begin fighting these Christian crusaders. Saladin had well-organized armies. Emirs led his armies, and they were known for their honesty and their fair treatment of captives. And they were shocked by just how cruel the crusaders were. Saladin's armies used fast ponies and short bows. The crusaders were slow. They had heavy armor, long, clumsy swords, unarmored horses. In 1187, Saladin's armies took back Jerusalem, but he refused to kill all the crusaders. This actually earns him respect of the crusaders, that he didn't just kill them. So the church is going to urge another crusade, because obviously Jerusalem's fallen back into the hands of the Muslims. This time you're going to have the Crusade of Kings. This is the Third Crusade. This is going to be led by the most powerful rulers in Europe. You had King Richard I of England. He was nicknamed Richard the Lionheart. You had Emperor Frederick Barbarossa of Germany. And you had King Philip II Augustus of France. This crusade of kings is going to be a giant failure. Frederick dies, and when he dies, most of his troops leave. They never even saw battle because he died before they even got there. Richard and Philip are left, but they hate each other. I mean, they took some cities on the way there, but then Philip went home. And so now Richard's all alone, and he's going to fight for 3 years, but he just can't win. Actually ends up signing a truce with Saladin. But Jerusalem was still with the Muslims. In 1202, Pope Innocent III wants another crusade. This will be the Fourth Crusade. Knights are going to answer his call. And they go by ship from Venice, but they owe money to Venice for the ships and the supplies. So one thing the Venetians asked them was said, hey, could you attack Constantinople for us? Venice wants to be the number one trading center. Constantinople was in their way. And so they attack Constantinople for the Venetians. But then they decide to stay in Constantinople. They never even go to Palestine. So as you get into the 1200s, there's going to be various other crusades. The Europeans don't win any of them. One of the saddest events is going to be in 1212, the Children's Crusade. They weren't going to fight. They were going to convert the Muslims to Christianity. And you're going to have a number of French children led by Stephen of Cloyes. He was 12 years old. And they're going to head on a crusade. Most of the kids never saw Palestine. When they got to the sea, ship captains that were supposed to transport them there actually in turn sold them into slavery. You had German children marching towards Italy to head to Palestine. Most of them actually starved or died of disease. So the Children's Crusade was tragic. In 1291, Muslims are going to take Acre. This was the last Christian stronghold. The Muslims win the Crusades. They recaptured all of the land that they had lost. So let's end here by talking about the effects of the Crusades. It affected the Near East and Western Europe both. What you've got is you've got the Byzantines are mad at Western Europe. And so this Eastern and Western Christianity split now becomes permanent. There was no hope that Christianity was going to be put back together. The Byzantine Empire itself was weakened. It can't defend itself. It's so weak. They're now open to Turkish attack themselves. The system of feudalism is breaking down. The lords are gone away fighting, which means those kings can start increasing their power because those powerful lords are gone. And the culture of the Byzantines and Muslims begins to pique the interest of Europeans. Europe hadn't been interested in many years. They had been going through something called the Dark Ages. But now their interests are peaked. You're going to have new trade routes form to get luxuries from the East. As people had went to the Near East here, spices and sugar and lemons and rugs and tapestries are all discovered. And towns begin to grow as trade grows.